Without Project Clean Slate, there is no telling where I would be right now.
It gave him back his life, because once he got the felony, it seemed like life was over.
Being unemployed, being depressed, being a burden. Project Clean Slate helped wipe those things away. I can't say thank you enough. I am now able to work for a reputable airline. Detroit had my back, all because I live in Detroit.
All right, I'd like to welcome you to this edition of In the Conference Room with Mark S. Lee, where we have business leaders, community leaders from across Detroit and beyond, and we have a casual conversation about the latest happenings going on in and around the Motor City. My name is Mark S. Lee. I'm your host, and we've been doing this now for several years, and so I always appreciate your level of support. Feel free to continue to spread the word, spread this link to other people who might be interested in watching. We know we have a lot of people watching from across the country who are native Detroiters, and they want to keep in touch with what's going on. All right, just sit back and relax and enjoy the conversation with a very special guest, Mr. Darren Nichols. He's a columnist / guest columnist with the Detroit Free Press, a longtime journalist in this great city, and he has a unique perspective on what's going on in Detroit. Now, as we all know, before I jump on, go ahead any further, I should say, is last week we just had the NFL draft here in Detroit, and by all accounts, it was a very successful event. Over 750,000 people showed up over a 3-day window. Millions more watched on television. I gave my perspective recently on television as well. But I want to just say an awesome experience for the city of Detroit as a native Detroiter. And many people were watching across the country. Congratulations for a job well done, hosted by the Detroit Lions here in the great city of Detroit. And by the way, go Lions with those wonderful draft picks as well. All right, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Mr. Darren Nichols. Darren, thank you very much for joining me in the conference room. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Mark, for having me here.
My pleasure, my pleasure. And I wanted to have you on because, obviously the draft was last week, and you wrote a very interesting piece that I read this past weekend in the Detroit Free Press, and you kind of provided a unique perspective about the draft. Not only just its impact in the city, but also expanding it throughout the entire city so that everyone gets a chance to participate. So kind of, let's start there. Let's start with your take on the draft last week, but then let's talk about your column specifically.
Sure. Obviously, the draft went off with tremendous fanfare. All was good fun was had by everybody who was there. And a number of people reached out to me and told me that they had a great time, and the city just put on a wonderful job, as shown by us breaking the attendance record, as well as the millions upon millions that was raised or was spent within the city.
So as you think about the draft, going into the draft, did you have any concern about this undertaking for the city? In other words, Detroit has hosted so many major events, but for some reason, I think did you have a sense of trepidation or concern or nervousness that the city could pull it off like it did?
I didn't, and I mentioned that in my column. I think we're past that moment in time where we have big events and we think that something bad is going to happen. We think that the Nancy Kerrigan incident is going to happen, and we think that it's somebody from Detroit that does it, right? We are well beyond that. We have put on great big events for quite a while within the last 15 years or so, and I think so as a result, Detroit was ready as usual, and the people responded.
They did respond, and I was receiving messages and text messages from people across the country saying how Detroit looks so good on television. Those drone shots were incredible. I think the crowd interaction was certainly wonderful. From what I understand, downtown was impeccable in terms of it being clean and people engaging with each other. And I think, that's what it's going to take for us to continue to to move our great city forward. And I think my take on it, Darren, was that thus far, generally speaking, the articles have been favorable. The image has been certainly moved forward in a positive way relative to, let's say, where we were 10 years ago. Talk about the impact these types of major events, because my understanding, the NBA was there this past weekend, as a possible All-Star game. The NHL is expressing consideration. Talk about the importance of these events for the city's psyche overall.
Well, like you said, the NBA and NHL was there, looking at our city as way to be a host city for both of those major events. The Final Four will be here in 2027, and so Detroit is becoming somewhat of a destination spot as it relates to some more of these major events. And this weekend only helped with our attendance record, with how our police responded, with how there was a mixture of people in the crowd, and all of those things that made, and everyone had a great time, and everything that this event brought to Detroit.
But yet, you wrote this column that was published for those of you just tuning in this past Sunday's paper and print in the Detroit Free Press, was also online, was published late last week, I believe on Friday. It kind of addresses the elephant in the room, so to speak. Unpack from your perspective the overview of the column and the messages that you were trying to get out. Why did you write the column? And I'm going to let you provide the overview because you obviously wrote it. You have a better context of what the focal point of the article was.
Sure. I mean, for years it's been bubbling that the only thing that happens in Detroit is within the 7.2, which is downtown. And for this, obviously I made mention of several of the events that the NFL did within the neighborhoods of Detroit. And as a result, my take was to challenge people that lived inside the city of Detroit, the center of the city, to come and participate in events downtown, because we have a mentality of that's their downtown, and we're talking about white folks and affluent Black folks as well. And my point was, in some way, your tax dollars are going toward what is happening in the city of Detroit, and you should participate in it. And it's that simple. It's not for simply just white folks and affluent Black folks. It's for somebody on 7 Mile, for somebody on 6 Mile, it's for somebody on Puritan or Gratiot or Van Dyke or Cashew or wherever wherever you live in the city of Detroit. It was made for you too. And so that was my point with this column, was that we need to do better in terms of making sure that Detroiters feel welcomed within their own city as well.
So it's another way we've heard going back several years the idea of two Detroits, and
Sure.
certainly the definition back then was as it relates to like downtown versus the rest of the city. There was some gentrification going on downtown, and so the perception of a lot of suburbanites was certainly partaking in different restaurants in the city, for example, but not everybody felt they were totally involved or included to have the opportunity to go down there and partake as well. So thus the idea of two Detroits. And as I was reading your column and as you're talking, I love what you just said. It's almost, from my perspective, this is another way of addressing that two Detroit connotation. And what you're saying as well, not to put words in your mouth, this is an opportunity for everyone to be engaged in events such as the NFL draft. And one of the things I noticed is, reading the different accounts like in the Free Press and other publications, one of the coolest things I saw, Darren, was the Detroit hustle. There was a
Right. Yes.
hustle that was, it was mostly African Americans out there, but everybody was chiming in and dancing. And for those of you tuning in, there was this called a Detroit hustle that was being performed outside the main stage, and it was a wonderful sight to see where people, Black folks and white folks, predominantly African Americans, were dancing and doing the hustle, and people were just coming in and enjoying the moment. And to me, that resonated with your column where people were coming down and just enjoying that moment.
Right. I mean, it's really about coming down and enjoying the moment, enjoying the draft, going down and enjoying the Grand Prix, going down and enjoying a Lions game or a Pistons game, or all of these things that Detroit has is very wonderful. But common average Detroiters shouldn't feel as if those things are not for them.
Right.
I get why they don't want to come downtown in some aspects, or they don't want to go to Belle Isle in some aspects, because your tags have been expired. I call it riding dirty. Your tags have expired, and you don't want to get a ticket or go to jail as a result of not being able to afford a tag on your license plate. So, it is sort of, in a sense, pushed people out into the neighborhoods and as a result, to neighborhood parks. And so as a result, they just kind of stay within their own, and they go to Teresa's, they go to their neighborhood watering hole, they go to the locker room, or they go to several other spots within their neighborhood, but because they feel safer, and they feel like they're with their own people, and we have to get out of that mentality if we're going to grow even further. We have to take that next step of, and don't get me wrong, I certainly understand that business tax pays more than residential tax in Detroit.
Yeah.
So I get you have to take care of downtown and make it look shiny and pristine for people to come into. But we have to find a way of making all of our people feel welcome when they come downtown.
And I think you make a good point. We've been so focused, we be in general, not me personally, you personally, but the perception has been that 7.2 mile radius, as you referenced earlier, between downtown and the Midtown area where a lot of development has been taking place. But you're right. I think Detroit's 139 square miles. And clearly it's important that all people have the opportunity to engage and enjoy what our city has to offer. I will give the NFL credit. I thought they did a wonderful job leading up to the draft, to your point, getting out into the community, really engaging with the young people. They made one of their residual headquarters, if you will, for lack of a better phrase, the Detroit PAL headquarters, right?
Sure.
Over there, Michigan and Trumbull. And you saw young kids going out there and playing. You saw the draft picks, the potential draft picks back then, out there playing with the young people. And and my hope is that what the NFL did in terms of engaging the city at large is what other businesses, whether it be sports or not, don't just come in and invest your resources downtown. Yes, we like that. I mean, the economic impact was over $160 million. But but I think the important part is engage in other parts of the city, because a lot of people living out in the neighborhood still feel like downtown's a long ways away. They got to take the bus. Sometimes they drive, or they go down there for different reasons. They feel like they're not participating in those fun activities. So my point in saying all this is that is I hope that other conventions, events that are coming into the city look at what the NFL did and really begin to engage the community in terms of what can we do to leverage the city at large and not just a particular segment. The other part I want to get your take on is many suburbanites, came into Detroit. And a lot of times in Detroit, a lot of what I've noticed here, a lot of people will say, well, where are you from? They might say their individual suburb, whatever that town might be. But what I was noticing this week is there were a lot of suburbanites that were saying, oh, Detroit's my city all of a sudden, right? I'm from
Sure.
Detroit. Yeah. How do you feel about that? I mean, just kind of give me an honest take on that.
I mean, I don't have a problem with that. I mean, because the national um, media, everyone recognizes Detroit proper. They don't recognize Warren, Farmington Hills, Troy, or wherever else you may live, Southfield, wherever else you may live. The reality is that throughout the nation, they only understand Detroit and that sort of thing, right? Um, and you know, I mean that is a Detroit thing, right? If you're in Houston, the greater Houston area is 1 hour from the center of downtown Houston, right? And so they don't recognize the suburbs as not being a part um, of Houston. The same thing you could say about Atlanta as well. There are a lot of people who live in, a lot of other counties, and they are included, particularly in their census numbers, and they're included with the greater Atlanta area, the greater, they call it the Chicagoland area. And so, and they don't really recognize those suburbs. But because it was built because of the auto industry, where they built cars, and they put malls, and they put everything, and they put everything within their neighborhoods, affordable house. It brought out a growth of suburban areas, for the rest of the world. And so I think that is why we have become um, so protective of our city as it relates to what you're saying. And I
I
just I'm sorry,
Go
Mike.
ahead.
I just want to
Go
add
ahead.
one more thing about
Sure.
um, downtown in terms of business. That is the conundrum of every mayor. That has been since I've been covering mayors. And we could always point to the Cobo expansion in 1989. You had people that were upset about Coleman Young, building in downtown Detroit, not in the neighborhoods as well, even the beloved Coleman Young. And so that has been an issue with every that is an issue with every mayor, and will be the issue with every mayor probably in my lifetime. So I just wanted to add that for extra context as to what we're talking about here. It's not just Mike
And
Duggan, you know.
Yeah, well, I think that's spot on. I think that's a very
Yeah,
fair assessment. And one of the things I would like to see us do, we are a region of 5 million people, and I mean, I'm glad that the suburbanites enjoyed themselves in the city. What I'm getting at with my point too is that, but okay, now that you've had a great experience, come back again and again. Don't just come down for the major events,
sure,
right? Don't just come down for the Tiger game. Say, okay, yeah, I haven't been in Detroit in 3 years, but I'm the first one there for a Tigers game, or for a Red Wings game, or for a Lions game. What I'm saying is now that these people being everybody's exuding this pride about Metro Detroit and the city of Detroit, go in there and spend your money, not just downtown, but explore the neighborhoods. And my son does live in Chicago. I lived in the Chicagoland area for 12 years. One of the things I will give them credit for is a lot of people, even where I live in suburban areas, you ask them where they were from, they would say Chicago, or they would certainly spend their weekends, or they would go into the city, if you will, and not just downtown, but they would explore all parts of the city, not just the downtown area there.
sure,
And so, my hope for us is we have our people being in Metro Detroit have a similar experience. Don't just go down there for the major events, but go down there on a Tuesday afternoon,
sure.
drive through the neighborhood, spend time in it, go to restaurants in the neighborhood. Our city is a great city. We have a lot to offer. And that's the point I was trying to make is, you know, if I had a vision, aspirational vision, or even our own region, I would love to see us begin to interact that way, and not just for the special events. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely correct. I mean, you know, uh, in Chicago, there are all kinds of places to eat and places to go and things like that. And that's the charge. The charge is convincing major restaurants and other businesses to be in the neighborhood, to have a major sports bar on the Avenue of Fashion. You can say come in and be in our neighborhoods, but we have to have something down there that attracts them to our neighborhoods as well.
Yeah.
And so I think that is the next phase of that has to be the next phase of where Detroit is going. And so, I mean, again, we are, 60 something years removed from the 1967 riots. We have to begin to shed that mentality that we have about not fixing up an area that was burned down and burnt out from the 1967 riots. And so, or rebellion, whatever you want to call it. And so I think that's kind of the issue that's at play.
And that's as we begin to wrap up, that's where I want to take the conversation briefly. NFL draft was over. Obviously, spectacular reviews. The city looked wonderful. People came together. Where do we go from here? What are the next steps? How can the city leverage this opportunity that we just had in the spotlight? Where do we go from here? And how do we translate it to additional opportunities, business, residents, growth? What do we do?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the question out here is what do we do? I mean, I think we have to continue to chop away at the building blocks of what is going on in the city. Like my golf instructor would always say, you have to pound the rock, right? In order to get better, you have to pound the rock and pound the rock every day. And so I think that's the issue with Detroit. We have to continue to pound the rock, but we also have to stop ignoring the one area that is holding our city back, and it's our schools. We have to bring our schools in a better place so that other folks feel comfortable with moving into Detroit and investing in Detroit. And without and that doesn't say that Dr. Vitti has not done a good job or a great job so far, but it's only 5 years into his tenure here in Detroit. And we have a long way to go. And so that's when people will really see a gentrification. What you're seeing now is classism. It's not gentrification. Gentrification is when a group of class moves into a city and they remove Black folks from where they are. It's DC where they go from the chocolate city to being 45% of people who live in DC proper. And so we have to keep that in its proper context as well, right? Okay. But when it's all said and done, our school system really has to be a way of attracting people to move into our neighborhoods, and businesses feeling more comfortable in putting their establishments within the city in order to move forward.
I couldn't say it better. Darren Nichols. You can read his columns in the Detroit Free Press, a guest columnist. He contributes on a regular basis, does a wonderful job, has a pulse for the city. And I hope this conversation is enlightening all of us in terms of, yes, we're all very proud of what just occurred with the NFL draft. There's much more to do. We have other opportunities to continue to grow our city and invest in the resources where we need to invest in. Darren Nichols, man, you're the absolute best. I always enjoy conversations. Thank you very much for joining me in the conference room.
Well, thank you, Mark. I really appreciate it, and continued success with your show.
Thank you very much. For all of you, thank you for tuning into the conference room this week with Mark S. Lee and Darren Nichols. We will be back with other leaders from across the great city of Detroit and beyond in our next edition of In the Conference Room with Mark S. Lee. Go out and make it a great day and a great week, and we'll talk to you soon.
The Lee Group will be holding its 10th annual Small Business Workshop, May 15th, 8:30 a.m. at the Corner Ballpark, 1680 Michigan Avenue in Detroit. Hear from business leaders and other entrepreneurs discussing embracing change while moving forward. You don't want to miss this free event. For more information, go to leegroupinnovation.com and check Small Business Workshop.